Hey, what's up guys? Frosty here. Gonna do a hand of the week video for you guys right now. Originally I wasn't thinking I would have time to do one this month with all the Micro Millions stuff going on, but I decided to cut my second session a bit short today and still wanted to be productive, so I figured I'd crank out a YouTube video for you guys. As you can see, the session went pretty well. Won a few buy-ins over 913 hands. I decided to cut it short just because I was been kind of frustrated this weekend. Um, I think I booked two small losing sessions in a row, and I think like having hand goals and volume goals are obviously important, but I think sometimes just booking a winning session is pretty good for the mental game as well. And I think it's definitely something you might want to consider doing if you're going through a downswing or something. Just, book a small winning session, get some confidence back, get a few buy-ins back, and kind of go from there. I can't even say I've been going through a downswing. The losing sessions were like two buy-ins and like $25 or something like that. But I was still just getting frustrated. Like I could just feel myself getting frustrated because it's the weekend and the games were just so good and just nothing was going my way. Just like lots of situations where I I'd just be in a spot like range versus range pre-flop and have my opponent crushed and then just end up losing the pot like every time. Just lots of like I don't know, like three betting like hands like ace king against weaker players and just never flopping anything, blah blah blah. So anyways, long story short, I think sometimes just ending a session when you're up a couple buy-ins can be a good thing. Um, Other than that, the month is going fine. With the Micro Millions, like originally I was thinking I could play cash games alongside the tournaments, but that just wasn't a reality. It was just like play a tournament, go to sleep, play a tournament, go to sleep. There's just like I was just like so physically drained that it was just like not possible to really play cash games along the side. So I've only played like 24,000 hands this month, I think. But things have been like I don't feel like I've been running that well, but things have been going fine. I've definitely been running well in terms of like EV. I think I'm up like 15 buy-ins, winning at like 5.5 big blinds per hundred. So, it's obviously it's obviously like not sustainable. So things are going pretty well. So yeah, with that said, why don't we just jump into the action? I've got, like I said, four hands for you guys here, and we'll just fly through them. First hand, we got ace jack of diamonds. I go for the three bet, get called in two spots. I think three betting is far superior to flatting here, given that we're going to have position on the weaker player. We're about 130 deep, and it's kind of a spot where like even if the reg has a better hand, like he's going to be calling quite frequently rather than just four betting because he wants to keep the weaker player in the pot. So yeah, I think obviously flatting is fine too. We also have two regs on the button, which makes me want to three bet even more. If there's some weaker players in the blinds as well, this is a pretty good hand to go multi-way with. But yeah, I think just the benefits of three betting are just always going to be better in this spot. Pretty good flop, not flush draw. Checks to the weaker player and he leads for half pot. So obviously I'm never folding. It's just a question of do I want to flat, do I want to raise, and then if I want to raise, what sizing do I want to make it? Yeah, so I thought about this for a sec. Like my instinct just kind of told me to call, but I thought about it a little more, and I actually think I like raising. I think I like raising better for a couple of reasons. I think the first is just because I think we do have fold equity against the weaker player. I don't think I can't say for sure what this lead is, but I think in general these leads are never that strong. Like I think on occasion I'll have some queen X that just will never fold, but I think you can also have a hand like pocket nines, like 8x, like 6x, and then I think you can have like some random stuff too. Like you could have like Jack 10, but I think he'll even have some stuff that doesn't make any sense, like ace 4 offsuit. Like I don't know, just like some random stuff occasionally. Maybe like 9-10. Again, like 9-10 and Jack 10 actually make a little bit of sense, but yeah, I think you can have those hands. So obviously we're ahead of those hands, but it's not like we're going to be able to call down if we miss on diamonds easily, or we just give them free equity and the pot's already fairly big. So that's one reason. And then two, I think we definitely fold out some better hands that the reg could have. I think he definitely just folds tens and jacks and nines like every time. I actually think we can even get this reg off a queen. Maybe not like ace queen, but I think we're like never, if we raise, which I do, I think we're never perceived to bluff this spot. So we're gonna have like aces and kings, queens like all day. We're gonna have like ace queen. So yeah, I just and like yeah, maybe he thinks we'll raise some flush draws, but I think he'd probably think that we're gonna call flush draws at least sometimes too. So I just think we're never perceived to be bluffing this spot very often. So I don't even think it would be a bad fold if he folded a hand like queen jack or like even king queen. On the other hand, if we call here, I think it's very likely that the reg could actually quite comfortably shove those hands because the board is fairly wet. I think I think by the same token we would be perceived to raise our strong value hand. So if we end up calling here and then the reg gets to shove king queen, that kind of sucks for us. I mean, we can obviously still call. We still have okay equity, but it's not really ideal. So yeah, for those reasons, I just like raising. And then when it comes to sizing, I like going smaller rather than just shipping it all in. Like obviously shipping it is terrible for balance purposes, but I don't care about that anyways with the weaker player in the pot. But I just think it's better because I think like, well, one, I think it actually could look stronger. Depends on what the player thinks about my sizing, I suppose. Two, I think we actually get called sometimes, and then they just fold the turn. Like they just kind of call, and then they kind of basically just hope we check down, I guess. And I think we do have some fold equity on the turn some of the times. And three, I'll just roll it to the turn because I didn't really think about this at the time, to be honest, but this is a pretty big deal actually, is the fact that we can pick up additional fold equity if we make it small on the flop, because here he calls our raise, and then I mean the king is kind of like the dream card in terms of picking up more fold equity. If it just breaks off like a 4 or a 3 or like even a 9 or even a 10, I mean those cards kind of connect with his range and probably don't give us much fold equity, but maybe a jack if he's sitting there with pocket eights or not pocket eights, like pocket nines or whatever. Definitely a king. We pick up a ton of fold equity. So yeah, I think those are probably the merits of just betting smaller. So yeah, we turn a king and he checks and like I bet smaller, but I still set it up so we can just shove the turn. It's less than a pot size bet. And so I'm definitely going to shove this. If he has king queen, he's just snapping us off. Basically just hoping to get him off a pair. And he folds. So it ends up working out. Yeah, I'm not going to bother going back to the river, but I mean I can think of a few situations where shoving the flop works out better too. Like if he has a worse flush draw or something like that, maybe we potentially lost value. But I think if he has a flush draw, he's probably just putting all the money in on the flop anyways. So, I like my line there, and I'm happy with how it worked out. Okay. This one isn't really too interesting, but we'll just roll it anyways. So I isolated a weaker player with ace-9 offsuit. Yeah, we flop a gutter. There's probably just a couple things we're talking about here. I mean, first thing is, do we c-bet or not? And I think c-betting this would be a bit of a mistake. I just think this is a board that's going to connect with his range very often, and I think we're just putting money in behind a lot of the time. And obviously if we get check raised, we can't call, and then we don't even get to realize our equity. And there are potentially a few hands that could do that. King queen, queen 9 could potentially, I mean they could call too of course, but they could potentially just check raise all in. So yeah, for those two reasons I definitely like a check back here. I think that would probably be what most people would consider standard, but I'm not really sure. Yeah, we turn a straight, and this is probably the second thing we're talking about. So, I mean, I'm obviously going to bet. Um, I don't expect him to fold two pair. I don't even expect him to fold one pair, to be honest. So, I just make it 6 into 950, which I think is good. And he check min raises us. So, I guess this is probably the most interesting part of the hand. It's just like, do we call or do we shove? I mean, stack depths are so shallow, it might not seem to matter anyways. But I really think that if you're not calling here, you're making a fairly big mistake. Like, there's really nothing we have to protect against. Like, yeah, the flush draw kind of came there, but I'm just gonna let him, take his outs to the flush draw if he has a flush draw, because I think when he does this like min check raise, like he's either got a nine himself or he's just completely bluffing. Um, maybe he has a flush draw. I don't know. I think he could potentially take that line with a flush draw, but it doesn't really matter. I think like just especially given stack sizes, like if we just shove here, like we're just making him fold all his bluffs. He might still call it off with a flush draw. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't need to go into too much detail. I'm sure it's standard for most people, but I just wanted to quickly just, bring that up and just, even though it looks like he's pot committed, you got to remember that if he's bluffing, he can't call with like his ace three of hearts here. So yeah, just call. And then, yeah, he bets 16. I mean, at this point, I just kind of I assume we're just chopping a lot of the times. Like, I mean, I guess he can have like queen nine too, and we just lose. But yeah, I just put the money in. He only has $8 left, and he has ace seven. So, I mean, that's obviously why we call on the turn. I mean, I think I know what he was thinking. I think he definitely was bluffing on the turn in his mind. Like, I think he was really just trying to rep the nine, and then on the river he probably thought this was the best way to continue repping a nine. And then like his call seems absurd when I shove, and it is. But I really think that he was probably or they were probably just thinking, oh man, like I only have $8 left. Like I'm just gonna call, see what this guy has. Like maybe 2% of the time he has a miss flush draw or like miss king queen or something like that, and just calls it off. So yeah, I mean, I think it's very obvious, but you should just be shoved. In my shoes here, you definitely want to be just putting the rest of the money in on the river, even though he can potentially have queen nine and he can, we're potentially just chopping a lot of the time. I I don't expect him to ever really fold two pair as well, which he could potentially do that with. Depends on the type of player. So I think you would just be missing value. Yeah, this hand is a little bit more interesting. I open pocket eights from middle position. Get called by what I think is a pretty decent player on the button. Um, I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure what his stats are, but I think I don't know. I just remember him as being a fairly standard, non-crazy reg. So, nine high flop, dry flop. I think c betting's the way to go here. Yeah, I don't really like. I don't really have a check calling range too often on this dry texture. Anyways, we just have such a big range advantage pre-flop. Even though he can definitely have some decent hands on the button, and he can have pocket sixes, nines, and threes. But so do I, and I have all the overpairs as well. So pretty standard c bet. And with this hand specifically, it's just going to be too hard to play if we check. Like we check call, and then what do we do on basically any turn, any river? So I think it's better just to keep the initiative, and taking it down on the flop is totally fine, obviously. He calls and we turn a set, so that's pretty good. Standard double barrel, not much to talk about. Board's so dry, I just I don't go crazy with my sizing. I think it's good. And then it gets kind of interesting on the river. So against a weaker player, I mean, I'm just always betting here. Like, it's just not even close. I'm just going to go bet for value. Not even really care what my range looks like. Just basically going to be betting because I think they're just never going to be able to fold a pair. Against a better player, though, you definitely want to be thinking about what your range looks like in these spots, or in every spot. And then you also want to consider what their range looks like. So after I double barrel, I mean, just given how dry the board texture is, I'm not gonna have that many bluffs. Like I'm definitely gonna have sets and overpairs. Um, I could definitely have some overcards with backdoor draws on the flop. Um, so yeah, I think, and then with the queen coming in, I mean, like if I was betting queen X of clubs, spades, or diamonds, and chose to double barrel, I now got there. So I think my range is overall pretty strong here. Um, and then I think the villain's range is pretty strong after he calls the turn as well. Like he can definitely call extremely wide on the flop. Like I expect him to basically call any pair, obviously any set, lots of stuff with backdoor flush draws, potentially backdoor straight draws, open-ended straight draws, all kinds of stuff. But then I don't expect him to call because the 8 of heart doesn't bring many door draws. I mean, he probably has like 3 combos of Jack 10, like Jack 10 of clubs, spades, and diamonds, that he's going to call again on the turn with. But, now that got there with the straight anyways. So I think he has sets in his range. He has a few combos of Jack 10. Um, we block 7-8 pretty well. There's one combo of 7-8 he can have. And then he can have like obviously like tens, jacks, queens that just made a set. Potentially kings, potentially aces, depending on what he three bets pre-flop. I assume. So I don't know. Range versus range. I mean, I would say that it's pretty close. Like I don't think either one of us has a huge range advantage over the other. So then I have to ask myself, like, well, like what hands do I show up to with the river here, and like, do those hands, do the majority of those hands want to triple barrel, or do they want to just kind of get to showdown? So it's a tricky spot because that queen it's really interesting. I mean, I'm definitely with the queen on the river. I mean, I'm definitely gonna have some hands that just want to get to showdown now. Like all my 9x hands. Like I don't have a ton of 9x hands, but it looks like there might be a weaker player in the big blind. So I could open like ace 9 suited for sure. Definitely like 9-10 suited, maybe 9-7 suited. And then I definitely have pocket tens, and I definitely have pocket jacks. So those hands definitely want to just check and try to get to showdown. Same with like 6-7 suited, I think. And then I'm gonna have like tens, jacks want to get to showdown, and then I'm gonna have like kings and aces, which it becomes close. I mean, it sort of depends on what your overall game plan is too. I mean, like if you play aggressively and like to go for thinner value bets, and like you're definitely going to triple aces, and you're definitely going to triple kings, and you might even triple tens and jacks for value, then most of your range wants to bet the river, so you're definitely going to want to bet with your eights. But I just don't think that's the best way to play 100 NL or lower or even higher to some extent. I mean, the problem is like once the villain calls the turn, the range is so strong that if you start just like tripling like pocket jacks for value, like I would be astonished if you're making money with that bet. I would just assume you're just going to get called by a set way too much, or an overpair way too much, or just get bluff raised and have to fold way too much. So it seems super nitty, but I wouldn't even love like triple barreling with like aces or kings here. Like I think it would be okay. I think it would be obviously be fine, but just given the fact that I do have so many hands that do just want to check this, and given the fact that I'm not even like super stoked on barreling like kings or aces or like queen X if I somehow have it, I think I just like checking here and just kind of protecting my range and kind of going from there. I'm not really sure. Like he's definitely going to value bet a set. Obviously, I just like I don't expect to get like a bluff out of him very often because I don't think there's many bluffs he can have. But yeah, this spot's kind of weird. I mean, like, yeah, I don't expect him to bluff too often, but I also don't expect him to call with worse now. Like, just because if he has like tens or jacks, like, I don't know if he's gonna call with that queen on the river, even though I don't think we're perceived to have a lot of queens, but we're definitely perceived to have a lot of Jack 10 ourselves as well. So it's just really hard for him to call with a worse hand anyways. So I kind of like just checking here. Kind of just protects my range, like I said, and it also gives him a chance to maybe turn a hand into a bluff. Like maybe he had 9-10, and maybe he wants to turn that into a bluff, or maybe something with less showdown, maybe like 6-7 or something like that. So that's what I choose to do. And he bets 19. And now, if you thought I was nitty before, you're going to think I'm even nittier now because I actually don't like check raising this hand, even though it might seem kind of crazy. And the reason I don't like check raising though is just because I don't think we can get called by worse very often. It just depends on how good the player is and how good he is at hand reading, because if we check raise here, like, he's got to realize, like, even if he's sitting with like a set of threes or like a set of sixes, like, he doesn't beat any part of my value range. Like, I'm never just like check raising like pocket kings here for value, like, obviously. And yeah, just given the fact that I can have Jack 10 for sure, and I can have pocket queens for sure, pocket nines. I mean, I can have all the bigger sets myself. I just think the chances of him bet calling with like pocket threes are going to be so much, like, so low, especially compared to the times where he's just bet calling with like pocket queens or Jack 10 and just snap this off. So call me a nit, but I don't care because I don't think check raising is very good here. And yeah, I actually really like my line, so I stand by it. I'll defend it if people think I'm being too nitty, but I go for the call. And I mean, what this means is like I'm not gonna have like a very wide check raising range on this river, but I really don't think I need to, because I just think the board is so dry, and just the way the hand played out, I just think that, yeah, I don't really need a big check raising range on this river. Like I don't even need a big check calling range on this river, to be honest. So I think like if I do want to check raise this, it's gonna be like okay, I should say at least like pocket eights is super close. Like I think I can check raise pocket nines even. I think it makes quite a big difference though. Like if I have pocket nines and like especially pocket queens, like he can have pocket nines, he can have pocket eights, etc. When I have pocket eights, like there's only two sets that can potentially bet call, and that's pocket sixes and pocket threes. And like I said, I don't even think those bet call that often. And then we just like are like stoned dead against pocket nines and pocket queens and Jack 10. So I think I mean I think it's like, I shouldn't say it's like a clear cut like call or even like clear cut like check on the river, but yeah, I think it definitely is. And I think like pocket nines like can probably be a check raise, and like pocket queens is obviously a check raise, and Jack 10 is obviously a check raise. And then if I'm gonna have bluffs, like it's gonna have to be like, it's pretty much gonna have to be like stuff that I'm turning into a bluff. So like I think like ace queen makes some sense if I choose to double barrel that. I think like 9-10 makes some sense. Yeah, I don't think I would. I don't think I would need to like turn 8-9 into a bluff. I think that would have enough showdown value on itself. So, yeah, I'm just not gonna have much of a check raising range here. But, anyways, that was a little side note, I guess. But yeah, I'm happy with the way I played the hand, and he had pocket sixes. So, again, I mean, it looks like I might have lost some value, but I honestly don't even think he would call if I check raised. And I just think the times that he has pocket queens or Jack 10. Like, especially because we still have so much money left behind, like, I just don't think it's profitable. But, I mean, whatever. You can make up your own mind. Okay, last hand. Okay, well, I remember this hand. It's kind of interesting just because I think people might be unsure what to do on the flop and the turn. Just have a sip of water. So, one of these flops that, it's going to happen fairly often when we have a hand like pocket tens, kind of sucks, but not terrible. He checks. Now, I think it's definitely better to just start betting these hands. Like, I think there's some stuff we can get value from. Draws, 7x, basically lots of pocket pairs that he just won't fold on the flop. He looks like a weaker player, so he could definitely have like 4x and not fold. And the draws, obviously. And I think like if we just check here, like we're just going to be very lost in the hand. We're going to have potentially missed value. So I think the flop is clear C bet, and I don't think, it's nothing too crazy. It's probably pretty standard for most players, I would assume. And then I think the turn gets interesting because I think a lot of people would just check back here, and I really think that's a pretty big mistake. So, okay, when he calls the flop here, and then, I think most people check back the turn because they just feel that our villain can have queen X so often here that they're just kind of value towning themselves. And it's definitely true. Like, the villain can definitely have queen X here quite a bit. But just given how draw heavy the board is and how draw heavy the flop was, I think they definitely have a ton of draws in their range as well. And they also have some 7x, 4x plus maybe like pocket eights or a hand like that. They definitely have a lot of stuff that we actually beat right now. And yeah, if we check back here and then, well, I'll just get to the river first and talk about it a little bit more. So I do go for the bet, and he calls, and yeah, kind of a nice river, no draws get there, and he checks. So now I think it's a clear check back. And yeah, I think double barreling is definitely the best play, but I think triple barreling is a massive mistake. And you might say like, well, how can double barreling be so good and tripling be so bad? But the reason is just because when we double, we're getting value from a really large percentage of his range, right? We're getting value from all his draws, we're getting value from all his second pair type hands, and then we're losing to his queen X type hands. But if we triple, all of a sudden he's not calling with any draws, obviously. And then he's calling with his second pair type hands at a lower frequency. Like, we don't know his exact calling frequencies, obviously, but let's just assume he's always calling queen X. So, if we triple, now we're just looking at a calling range that has us always beat. Like, we're always beat if we get called, basically, because he always has queen X plus. And then he's just always folding his draws, and then we just don't know to what extent he's going to be calling with the second pair is basically what it comes down to. But I would have to assume that against most players, we're just not going to get called by a second pair type hand that often, especially because I think a lot of players can just fold the second pair type hand on the turn as well. So, if we factor that in, we're getting called by a second pair type hand even less, and then it just becomes a situation where we just fold out his draws and just always get called by queen X. So yeah, I think we definitely have a check back on the river, and it just gets interesting on the turn and a little bit interesting on the flop. But I hope that all makes sense. Like, we're c-betting the flop for value and basically some protection, and just because we want to keep the initiative and basically target the parts of his range that we're ahead of. And then we're just doing the same thing on the turn, but our plan is always going to be to check back the river unless we hit a set. Or potentially a queen, because then that just drastically reduces queen X combos. We could potentially bet a queen river, I think, as well. But yeah, I hope you guys can see the difference between doubling and tripling in the spot, and why double barreling makes a lot of sense, but triple barreling makes very little sense. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys. Questions, comments, always appreciated. I think the first hand wasn't too debatable. I mean, you can talk about the flop a little bit. Other than that, it's pretty standard. Second hand, not much to talk about. I think that was probably the most standard hand of the bunch. Third hand is definitely the most interesting slash controversial slash call me a nit. But yeah, whatever. I don't care. Let me know what your thoughts are though if you want. And then yeah, the last hand I think was just interesting for the turn river play. So anyways, guys, take care. Have a good rest of the weekend. And like I said, comments, questions always appreciated. All right, guys, it's been Frosty. Take care.